Hi, it's Maija here, and today I'm here with my wrap-up for the Getting Graphic readathon, which took place one day in June, and I'm also going to talk about all the other graphic novels and comic trades that I read during the month of June. So let's start with the comics that I read for the Getting Graphic readathon, and I actually read all of the comics that were on my TBR, my main TBR on my TBR video, so if you watched those, I managed to finish all of those. And the first that I read that day was An Age of License, a travelogue by Lucy Nicely. So this tells of Nicely's travels through Europe. She is invited to a Comic-Con in Norway. After that she goes to visit this guy she's seeing and travels Europe with him, as well as later with her mom and her mom's friends. This being a travelogue with different episodes and countries and cities, I of course enjoyed some parts of it more than I enjoyed others. I wasn't that interested with her relationship with the Swedish guy, but some parts I liked, and this has very lovely art. One of my favorite conversations actually is when the guy she's seeing tells her of this Swedish children's book called The Brothers Lionheart, and she refuses to believe, she's an American, and she refuses to believe that this is a real thing. It is a real thing. There's a movie adaptation that I watched a lot of times as a kid, and this is what the guy says about it. In Sweden, we have our own Harry Potter. It's called The Brothers Lionheart. It's about two young boys who die tragically. When they die, they go to Nangiala, where they join a war over slaves and land. It's about evil and the nature of man at war. And yes, that's a real thing. It's a book by Astrid Lindgren, who also wrote Pippi Longstocking. So there you go. So like I said, I did enjoy the art. I really liked how the line work flowed in some pages, but like I said, I enjoyed some parts more than others, so I only gave this one 3 stars. The next comic that I read was Not Girl, Volume 1, Green Hair Don't Care by Brian Lee O'Malley and Leslie Hung. And this is a story about Lottie Person, who is an Instagram or blogger, celebrity, fashionista. And I had read the first 4 issues previously and just needed to finish the 5th issue, but since I had forgotten a lot, I just read the whole volume. This has the first 5 issues. Before starting, I had to remind myself that this is a Brian Lee O'Malley comic, even though the art is by a different artist. Brian Lee O'Malley's protagonists are most often unlikable, so if I found Lottie unlikable, it would probably be on purpose, and I actually did find her pretty unlikable. So after reading this, I'm still not quite sure what the comic is supposed to be. The plot is a bit messy and the storyline is sometimes hard to follow. The 5th issue made me interested though. The ending was so interesting and then the whole thing ended. And I have to wait for new issues. So I will be continuing on with this series, even though I didn't really enjoy this first volume. I hope that once the weirdness gets truly unleashed, perhaps in the 2nd volume, I will be more into it, but I'll report back later. I gave this one only 2.5 stars. So the third thing that I finished was Giant Days Volume 1 by John Allison and Lisa Treyman. And this is a contemporary comic set in a college in the UK. I actually thought that this was set in the US, but it's not. And it follows this group of 3 girls who are friends. And it was fine. I just think that this contemporary university setting just isn't for me. But I have to say that the sleek and colorful art style was really fun and it worked well with the story. I might continue reading these if they were available in my library, but they are not. But I do have the 2nd volume because I bought this comics bundle from Humble Bundle. It was a bunch of Boom comics and it had the 1st and 2nd volume, so I will be reading the 2nd volume sometime, but not that soon. And then I think I will not be continuing with the series. I gave this one 3 stars. So at this point I was getting pretty desperate because I had read 3 comics for the Getting Graphic readathon already and I hadn't really loved any of them. But I decided to pick a fantasy comic next and hope that it would break my bad luck. And it did, and that was Shul Arun, The Girl from the Other Side, Volume 1 by Nagabe. And this was a very heartwarming story, although it had its dark tones. And there was this beautiful scratchy artwork that really complemented the story quite perfectly. The story is quite quiet and slow, and the art is just lovely to look at. And I was instantly drawn to these 2 characters and their relationship. Teacher really cares about this kid, but can never touch her, or he would spread the outsider curse and she would turn into this monster as well. So basically the whole comic, it was just, ow my heart, the girl makes him a flower crown and he bakes a pie for her, and but it's also about this dark world where paranoid humans are killing their own, afraid that they have the outsider curse. The blurb of this is spot on. It says a tranquil fairy tale about those human and inhuman. And I will definitely be buying Volume 2. This was actually the only comic that I owned that I read during the readathon. Then the final comic that I read for the readathon was Vision Volume 1, A Little More Than a Man. I have Volume 2 here, Little Better Than a Beast. And this is a 2-volume Marvel comic, so the story completes in 2 volumes. I already had to return the first one to the library, so that's why I'm showing you this. This is a great short series. I really enjoyed a self-contained arc in a superhero story. This had a distinct dark sci-fi feel instead of this superhero heroic feel, and it was so good. It tells about the Vision, who you might know from the movies. It's basically this android or robot character. I had only read about Vision in Young Avengers before, but I always liked him for some reason because I love android characters usually. This story was creepy and dark, and the setting was sort of this suburban gone wrong, and it dealt with questions of humanity, and the Vision has in this one built himself a family and wants to try to live like humans. So this was a really good story arc. Also in the second volume there is a character from the Runaways, and I'm always excited when I see Runaways characters in other Marvel comics, although I always end up disagreeing with how they are portrayed, but I think that the depiction fit with the dark mood of this comic in general. I gave this one 4 stars, but I'd want to also give you a caution for animal harm in both of these volumes. So those were all the comics that I read for the Getting Graphic readathon, but now I'm going to talk about the comics that I read in June in general. And the first that I read in June was Princess Jellyfish, Volume 4. This is Volume 4 of these 2-in-1 omnibuses that they are translating currently. These are by Akiko Higashimura, and I always enjoy these. These are really cute contemporary comics about a bunch of geek girls and this fashionista guy who are trying to save the house where the geek girls live. And I'm always on the verge of giving these 5 stars, but then settle on 4 for some reason or another. And this time I actually gave the full 5 stars for this volume, mainly because there is minimal amount of this evil blackmailing landshark lady. There are also lots of scenes of Tsukimi and Shu together. They are these 2 socially awkward dweebs who have a huge crush on each other, and it's just so cute. I love them together. And then there are also flashbacks of Shu and his little brother Kuranosuke, and those were so heartwarming as well. And I just had Shu feels all over the place, basically. The only minus points that I have for this volume is that Kuranosuke, who is this fashionista guy, thinks that all girls must like frills and ribbons, but then again, he would be the one to think something like that. 5 stars. Then I went on to read the 3rd volume of Descender, called Singularities, by Jeff Lemire and Dustin Wen. This is a science fiction comic series I'm reading from the library. I know this series has a lot of fans, but I'm not the biggest fan, but I still keep reading them. This continues the story of the robot boy Team 21, who is on the run. And this volume focuses on the backstories of many of the characters. So one issue is the backstory of one character. And I was going to give this 3 stars, since most of the issues were 3 stars for me. But then there was the final issue, which was the backstory for this huge driller robot called Driller. It was so good. It was like 4 or 5 stars, so I gave this volume 4 stars just for that story. Then I read an all ages comic that came in the Boom Comics Humble bundle that I bought, and this is about Goldie Vance, who is this sort of Nancy Drew character in that she's a young girl who is solving mysteries and crimes, and sometimes the crimes are bigger than they seem. For example, in this case there are like international spies involved, so it gets pretty big. Characters in this are fun, and the art is cute and colorful, but I might be a little old for it, or then I just didn't really care for the case in this volume. But the characters are delightful. The main character is Goldie, who is this biracial teen. I think she's about 16. But when I read the comics, I thought she was a bit younger than that. And she has a huge crush on this cool girl. There's also her friends. One of them is, I think, a concierge at her dad's hotel, or the hotel that Goldie's dad manages. And one of them is this guy who's supposed to be the resident detective of the hotel. And Goldie's sort of his assistant, or at least she sort of forces herself into his office every now and then. So if I didn't say, this is by Hope Larson and Brittany Williams, and I gave this one 3 stars. I think younger kids would really enjoy it. The final comics that I read in English in June was the Black Panther, A Nation Under Our Feet, Volume 1 by Ta-Nehisi Coates and Brian Stelfreeze. And I'm not actually going to rate this at all or even talk that much about it, since I was confused most of the time. I just didn't know enough background for the characters or for Wakanda, which is the place that Black Panther rules over, to decipher things and what was going on. So I can't in good conscience give this a rating. I leave it to people who know more about Black Panther. This is definitely not a starter story in my opinion, although it did help a bit when I actually read the back cover text. So usually I just skip the back covers of books or comics because they give too much away, but in this case it actually did help because it did tell some things that had happened in Wakanda before these volumes. But still, not really gonna talk about this. Then I also read 4 Finnish comics during the month, but I'm just going to go quickly through them. Since they are in Finnish, I think most of you can't read them. But the first one was Voro kolmen kuninkaan aarre, or Thief, the Treasure of the Three Kings, by Janne Kukkonen, and this is the latest winner of the Comic Finlandia Award. Lilia, the main character, dreams of being a master thief, but she only gets the crap assignments at the Thieves Guild, so she actually steals an assignment from the guild master. She gets mixed up with this weird magical cult and with this rich man who wants to open this door, behind which is supposed to be some sort of treasure according to all the legends. The art was nice, it was all in grey tones, but sometimes there were not enough stark blacks or stark whites, and the pages ended up looking a bit muddled. The story also never fully grabbed me, and I'm pretty sure that the only female character in the whole graphic novel was the main character, so that wasn't great. I still gave this 3 stars, the art raised the rating a bit. I also read Saniainen kukki juhannuksena, or The Fern Blooms on Midsummer by Reetta Niemensivu, and this is actually a historical fiction comic based on true events that takes place in Parkano, Finland, during Midsummer 1928, so not my usual fare. I love Reetta Niemensivu's art, the colors she uses are just so pleasing to the eye. 3 stars. I also read Leper Koala, edited by Hanna Pirita Lehkonen, which is a graphic novel anthology of historical fiction or mythology-based lesbian stories of varying quality, like often happens in anthologies. 3 stars in general. Some stories I just forgot instantly after reading them, and some stories were really good. And then finally I read the graphic novel Kumiko Flopsy, or Ghost Child by Terhi Ekebom. This is a sweet and eerie ghost story with somehow calming art. It's all told in full-page illustrations with little actual words. If you want to see what the art looked like, I show you that in the TBR video for Getting Graphic, so go see that if you want to see what it looks like. But this had a great atmosphere, if a little bit of an abrupt ending, and this one actually includes English subtitles. I gave this one 3.5 stars. So those were all the comics that I read in June. It was quite a lot. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!